Greetings. My name is Reverend Angel Kyodo Williams, and I am honored to be here with you on this auspicious occasion of celebrating the 50th anniversary of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and the teachings of Suzuki Roshi. My own practice literally begins with Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. I found a copy of the book when I was about 18 or so in a bookstore in New York City. And it profoundly changed my life because I felt like for the first time someone gave language to the way that I saw the world. And I can't tell you how much this meant to me, to be given an opportunity to understand my life as something that I am entirely responsible for. And not through what I understood at the time, through other traditions as faith, not so much through faith, but through the effort, the great effort of my own practice. That I could be responsible for not only the way that my life unfolds for my own suffering, but also through sincere effort and compassion and the Bodhisattva vow that I was responsible for the suffering of others, and that I could step into that and be responsible for and accountable to my life in a profound and ordinary way. I think that's perhaps the thing that is most striking about Suzuki Roshi's teachings for me, is the ordinariness of it. He opened a path that was not so much about going after enlightenment or places on high somewhere, but simple, straight, direct, one's own sincere effort over and over again, showing up again and again, day after day, moment after moment. Just zazen, just this practice. And for me, that meant that other people that I knew, that I related to, that in different ways in their lives would be able to access these teachings, because it didn't require that they belong to a club. It didn't require that they show up in particular ways, that they even really dressed in particular ways. It didn't require that they be a part of a particular class. It could be different colors, different races, different creeds. For myself, I also saw that people could be queer, they could be transgender, they could be many of the things that we are now seeing are a part of the great human spectrum of ways of showing up in the world, of being embodied in the world. And so I found a real invitation into this opportunity, again, not just for practice, not just for spirituality, not just for faith, but for a relationship with my life. And that meant that my people, the people that I was connected to, could also have a relationship with their life. And that meant a lot when so many of us had grown up in a society and in a culture that demanded of us to show up in ways that were not necessarily true to who we were. It demanded of us to show up in ways that was about performing or about trying to fit in other systems, to try to talk a way that other people wanted us to talk, or look a way that other people wanted us to look. And Suzuki Roshi's teachings really said you just could be who you were and bring your sincere effort, your sincere practice over and over again. And if you didn't have some kind of kensho or enlightenment, he himself said he didn't talk about it because it wasn't so much important, that didn't matter. And that was pretty different from many of the other paths, even in Buddhism, that I was hearing at the time. So, of course, what I set out to do was to invite other people to participate and enjoy the same practice that I was finding great sustenance and great, really relief from, great refuge from the world around me that was in so many ways denying the full truth of who I was, denying my own ability to step into my life and show up just as who I was and accept me in that way. As I took to the practice like my hair was on fire, I started my meditation first by myself, and then a few years later I had the opportunity to go and to visit San Francisco Zen Center, and I went there and woke up really, really early in the morning, which for me was very early in the morning. I was maybe just, in my very early 20s, just barely over 20 or so, and found myself making my way to the center, participating in my first formal meditation, and I left home with my zafu, and that has been my story ever since then. That has been my practice. It has literally been my seat ever since then. Back home, I found a Sangha in the way that many of us do after looking in many different places, and rooted myself in that community, deepened there. And then I had the opportunity to go back a few years later and make a kind of pilgrimage back in the Bay Area where I actually happen to live now. And I made my pilgrimage, went back to a few of the centers that related to San Francisco Zen Center, but also some other centers as well. And one of the things that I was surprised to find, I'm not sure really why I was surprised, but I was surprised to find that there I was, feeling very much like I was a part of this community. I had joined this great family. I had my nice white juban, the traditional Zen undershirt on, and I had a Zen jacket on, and went in excitedly to visit the center, and had someone look at me and look confused and actually ask me, was I lost? I was crestfallen, really. And this happened not just once, but it happened over and over again in places that I went. White-bodied, as we say these days, white-bodied people seem to be surprised to find me, a Black woman there, earnestly understanding or relating to the Zen practice. But I am not one that is pushed aside very easily, so I took that to be an invitation for me to step in and to find out what it is that I needed to do to create a greater path of opening and possibility for other people to access these profound teachings, because I took to heart that the Bodhisattva vow, I took to heart that our practice, our path, that the path that I was now aligned with and had made my own vows to, was about helping to relieve the suffering of others. And I knew that so many of the people that were in my life and people that were part of the many different circles and communities that I was a part of were suffering, and they were suffering in ways that I could see that this profound, simple, direct practice could help them be alleviated from that suffering. They could find relief from that suffering. I ended up writing a book, and some years later, I had the opportunity once again to return to the Bay Area. And I remember we were in this wonderful, beautiful space, and I was there giving a talk for Martin Luther King Day. And there was a lovely woman, really quite lovely, and yet she kept saying this thing. She kept saying, in our practice, and she would look at me, and then she would say it again, well, in our practice, and she would go on to explain something. And in our practice, and she would explain something else. And of course, after a while, I was thinking to myself, well, you know, aren't we both a part of this practice? Isn't this practice the Soto Zen practice, and I'm a part of this practice too, which happened to be the lineage and tradition that I was a part of. Well, as it turns out, I turned back to Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind with my inquiry about this. And because I remembered there is a passage that Suzuki Roshi said himself, that we are not, in fact, Soto Zen, he said. We're not even Zen. We are just Buddhists. We are just Buddhist. And if we want to take, somebody wants to maybe take on those names, then maybe they take on those names because we have no other way of figuring each other out. But really, we are all just here being Buddhists, doing this practice. And beyond that, he said, religion is not about this particular teaching or that particular teaching, but really it is about a whole array of teachings. It is about receiving a whole array of understandings that he said you shouldn't even think of things as teachings as good or bad, to really just accept them and to really just allow people to show up where they are. And that has been a great balm for me all of these years as I've made my way through this practice, through this tradition, through these teachings, which many of us know and many of us are waking up to in a profound way at the end of this year. Here we are in 2020, that has been an opportunity for so many of us first to be confronted with great challenge, but also to be confronted with the challenge of waking up not just to our own personal spiritual lives, but also to our social realities and what happens around us. In particular, within these vast teachings, within these profound, profound teachings that have so much to offer, what ails us today as a society, so much division, so much separation, that what this practice has to offer is exactly that invitation to say, you can come just as you are. You can come just as you are. And yet we haven't quite accomplished that. Myself, having written about this for many years, my own book is over 20 years now, I still look around and see that our tradition, 50 years in its life in the United States here, these teachings rooted, codified in the form of a book, still have far to go. That if our expectation is to have these teachings be as widely accessible as they are meant to be, as they ought to be, as is right and really our responsibility to make possible for them to be accessible for another 50 years. That we have some unlearning to do, and I would even say that it's time for us to do the work of beginning again. To begin again and to think about what it really means, as Suzuki Roshi said in his own words, ending the book, that we will one day have to come to an American Buddhism, that we will one day have to make a form that is our own. And while I appreciate, and I'm sure many of the people watching this deeply appreciate the beauty and the continuity of so many of the practices, so many of the traditions, so many of the forms, we also know that Buddhism has never been about remaining in just one way. As much as we talk about its long history and how it has always been, what it has always been is in fact evolving. What it has always been is in fact beginning again in country after country, area after area, region after region. It has found its way into different nooks and crannies. It has aligned itself with the faiths of the particular time, with the people of the time. It has contorted itself around gender. It has moved itself beyond just the walls of the monastery and brought itself out into the mainstream here in the West in a way that is quite unusual, really, from what has been known for the last couple thousand years. So we have made great strides towards generating a new and profound way of entering into these teachings, of inviting us into a deeper way, in the same way that Suzuki Roshi felt was possible here, that our beginner's mind here in America was fresh. You could say the West in general, that we approach these teachings in a way that is fresh, in a way that is does not have expectations, because we didn't have the availability of Buddhism as we currently know it in our own history and our own background. So we were new, we were alive, we had beginner's mind. And with that beginner's mind, we have the opportunity, and I hope that we take it up now, to say, what is it that we need to invite? What is it that we ourselves need to step into to begin again, to create the pathway for another 50 years of these profound teachings? How is it that in all of this time, with a teaching so deeply rooted in the idea of just simply showing up with your simple effort, that we've managed to not invite others or to create some kinds of structures that are keeping people out, or keeping them at least sitting a little bit further beyond the door of invitation than we would like them to? I know that we are here in this particular moment, this 50-year moment, at the same time, at this particular time of a 400+ year challenge and an invitation to begin again, to say, this is the time that we will begin again. This is the time when we will finally turn a page on a history that far too many of us have forgotten, never learned or misunderstood or just forgot or just left aside. It's time for us to remember so that we can begin again. It's time for us to look into our hearts and see what it is that is ours to do to create a path forward for all of us, for so many of us that have been outside of our great traditions, to be able to be welcomed in. And maybe that form will not take the form of even Buddhists, as Suzuki Roshi said. Maybe it will take the form of people that claim other faiths or claim no faith at all. I don't think that that's what our affair is to attend to. I think our affair is to stand in the deep, deep roots of these teachings, in the deep roots of Suzuki Roshi's teachings, and to simply invite people with their sincere effort to show up again and again, to take responsibility for their own lives, take responsibility for their own suffering, and to meet each other just as we are, to say over and over again, come as you are welcome here, in the same way that he welcomed that first group of American students that were as foreign to him as many people are to us in our tradition these days. He extended, nonetheless, his profound teachings to these different people from different backgrounds, from different cultures that didn't understand. He didn't present it in a way that was difficult. He presented it in a way that could meet them exactly where they are, and then the teachings unfolded from there. We all have that opportunity, and we all have that responsibility in this time. We all have the charge to evaluate how it is that we stand in the way of these great teachings and their ability to travel far and wide in our nation, far and wide amongst different bodies of people, people that don't look like us. We have it in our charge to say when someone shows up the door, welcome, before we say, what are you doing here? We have it in our charge to say, this is our practice, and I welcome you here. This altogether is our practice, and I welcome you here. So I hope that we will continue this next 50 years in the spirit of Suzuki Roshi's teachings, in the spirit, really, of Zen mind, beginner's mind, to allow ourselves to be open, to be fresh, to use our sincere effort to invite as many people as we can, far and wide, into not just this particular path, but into these particular teachings that are much greater, much wider than the path itself. Into this particular set of teachings that says, just come as you are. Bring your sincere effort, and you are welcome. Your Buddha nature will meet you there. I hope that we will all see each other there. Thank you so much.